Hey, what's up guys? My name is Naam, and today I'll give you your weekly stimulus check and stimulus package updates for the week of May 9th. I know that there are many people out there that talk about stimulus checks and stimulus package details. I must admit, I'm one of those guys who talk about this from time to time, but since there's such a vast demand for this type of videos, and there are so many people posting these videos on a daily basis and multiple times a day, it's hard to keep up with all the news. Every time that I blink, there's a new stimulus update. So I wanted to start a new segment where I would just give you the latest stimulus information on a weekly basis. So all you would have to do is watch one video to stay inside of the loop of what's going on in the past week, without watching 20 videos or so. If that sounds good, I'm gonna start making these videos on a weekly basis on every Saturday morning until this information dies up or there's really nothing else left to stimulate. So today I'm gonna be covering stimulus checks, EIDL loans, PPP loans, rent strikes, unemployment, and news covering whether or not there's going to be a second round of stimulus checks. So according to the National Taxpayer Advocate Service, the IRS has sent about 122 million stimulus checks and it paid out a total of $207 billion. If you are one of those 122 million Americans who already received your stimulus checks, you might have already received a letter in the mail signed by the man himself. So in a letter, it should have explained how much money you received and how your stimulus payment was sent. If you did receive that letter but didn't get your stimulus money in the right place, there is a number on that letter of who you can contact. But as of right now, that number is an automated number and is basically worthless. So hopefully soon that number can be somewhat useful. So for those who are eligible for stimulus checks, which is roughly around 150 million people, there are still about 30 million people who are still waiting to receive their checks. So by the end of this week, for individuals who made between $20,000 and $30,000, they should have begun to receive their stimulus checks in the mail. For individuals who make between $30,000 and $40,000, they should be receiving their checks in the mail within the following week. So now let's move on to individuals who are Social Security retirees, on SSI, SSDI, and eligible veterans. So on May 5th, this was the cutoff date for these individuals to use a non-filers form to claim dependents if they do have any. So for any of these individuals who are not able to file a non-filers form in time, they would just have to file taxes next year to receive that extra $500 for their child. For individuals who are on Social Security retirement, survivors, or disability benefits, and to use a non-filers form, if they left the bank account information blank, they would just receive their checks in the mail. But for the ones who did not file a non-filer's tax return and do not have any independence, they should receive their payments by direct deposit and direct express by May 13th. If they don't receive any payments by any of these forms, paper checks will be sent out in the beginning of May 15th. Just for clarification, for any individuals who uses the non-filers tool to claim independence, they would not receive their stimulus payment on their direct express card. They will receive the $1,200 payment and each child $500 payment via direct deposit if one was provided. If not, they would just receive a check in the mail. So now let's talk about veterans. According to Direct Express, eligible veterans should expect their stimulus checks no later than late May. Veterans, stay strong. As a vet myself, I'm pretty sure you're used to getting shafted. So let's see how this all plays out. So in other news, even individuals who are currently alive and living, they haven't seen their stimulus checks yet. But people who have passed away, they had already received theirs. So the IRS made some mistakes. It is unfortunate for people who had spouses that passed within the last year, even though they should be eligible since they filed jointly. On May 5th, the IRS did give us instructions on how to return these checks. So what you gotta do is write void on the back of this check and send it back to your regional IRS location with a note stating that why you're returning this check. Isn't someone mailing back their check? Isn't that pretty self-explanatory? And if you receive an overpayment, you would just have to write a personal check to the IRS, and also you would have to include a brief explanation of why you're returning your economic impact payment. But another question that popped up was, what if you don't return your stimulus check? What happens then? As of right now, there are gonna be people who won't return their money, just due to the fact that they probably already spent it, or they're just unaware of the IRS rules, or they really just don't want to pay it back. So no one really knows what the IRS is going to do around tax time, so we probably just have to wait until next tax season. Alright, so now let's talk about the EIDL loans. These are also known as the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. So starting the beginning of May 4th, which was earlier this week, the SBA said it would only accept applications from agricultural businesses. So initially for applicants who were accepted into this program, they would be eligible up to $2 million in loans at an interest rate of 3.75% plus a $10,000 advance grant that would not have to be paid back. As a reminder, this is only for new applications. Anyone who already applied for this program, you're basically just waiting in line. So now let's talk about PPP loans. For any business that received a PPP loan, you guys got to keep in mind that this money is not taxable. So the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, said that the money that's coming in is not taxable. You cannot double dip, and you cannot say that you're going to get deductions for workers that you didn't pay for. Also, Mnuchin did say that any business that is receiving the PPP loan, they should expect to get audited. just to ensure that these loans will be forgiven. We were also given a deadline of May 14th for businesses who got approved for the PPP loan but did not meet the recent revisions of the regulations. They can return these loans, no questions asked, without any penalties. So now let's talk about businesses that received a PPP loan in correlation with unemployment benefits. So there was new guidance from the SBA that warned employees who reject offers of reemployment, they can find themselves ineligible to receive unemployment benefits. This had to be addressed because there are plenty of individuals who are on unemployment right now who are making much more money than they would have if they were working. Some states, such as Ohio, have a website where you can snitch on your employees if they decide not to return to work, so they can get disqualified from the unemployment benefits. So me personally, I'm expecting more states in the future that will follow suit. So on the topic of unemployment, since the pandemic, there has been roughly around 33.5 million unemployment claims. This past week alone, there's been around 3 million new claims. The current unemployment rate in the United States is 14.7% for the month of April. So just to put that in perspective, the Great Depression had an unemployment rate that peaked at 24.9% in 1933. Even though unemployment claims are getting fewer by the week, it's still a significant number for the United States. In recent weeks, Uber, Lyft, Airbnb are some of the firms that have announced massive cuts in recent weeks just due to the fact that people are staying at home and less people are traveling. This week, there was also a new proposal that would extend the additional $600 a week unemployment benefits indefinitely until the whole pandemic ends. So the name of this proposal is called the Workers' Relief and Security Act. So in a nutshell, any worker who's currently receiving or eligible for the extra $600 a week unemployment benefit, they will continue to receive it 30 days after the president ends the state of emergency for this pandemic. Then after that, it will begin to phase out over a 30-week period. And also for any workers who exhausted their traditional benefits that are from the state, they can also receive federally financed unemployment benefits without a limit until 26 weeks after the end of extreme social distancing. So inside the proposal, it defined extreme social distancing would be 30 days after the president lifts the state of emergency. Also for self-employed, freelancers, and independent contractors who are currently receiving the pandemic unemployment assistance benefits, they too would not be limited in the number of weeks that they could claim until 6 months after extreme social distancing. Also for the self-employed, freelancers, or independent contractors who are currently receiving the pandemic unemployment assistance benefits, they too would not be limited into the number of weeks that they could claim until 6 months after extreme social distancing ends. The likelihood of this passing is probably very unlikely. One comment from Senator Lindsey Graham, he said that if a person is making $23 an hour on unemployment, it's going to be very hard to go back to work for a $17 an hour job. Like seriously, I know it will be hard for me to return back to work if I know I'm getting paid more not to work. So moving on, now let's talk about the main headliner that everybody wants to know. Will there be a second round of stimulus checks? Even though there's been talks of additional stimulus checks, I feel like it's a bit unfair since there's a large population of Americans that have yet to receive their first stimulus check. At the present moment, there's nothing that's been signed into law to send more stimulus checks, but there's been many opinions across the country saying that the first round of stimulus checks was not enough. With the most recent coronavirus relief bill that was signed into law on April 30th, it was more towards small businesses and infrastructure, rather than money for the people. So one thing I've been seeing mostly in the comments is that there's a lot of proposals, but none of them are getting married. Isn't that the truth? Probably the most popular one that's been floating around is the Emergency Money for the People Act. This essentially will give Americans ages 16 and older $2,000 stimulus checks each month for the next 6 months. But unfortunately, most Republican lawmakers don't really like this proposal. Stephen Scalise, he reported saying that it was a radical socialist idea. So yesterday on Friday, May 9th, there were a few Democrats that teamed up to release a proposal called the Monthly Economic Crisis Relief Act. One of these noble Democrats was the man himself, Bernie Sanders. So in a nutshell, this bill would essentially give married couples who file jointly $4,000 and $2,000 for each child up to a maximum of 3 kids. This would also prevent debt collectors from accessing this money if they do owe money. So inside the proposed bill, the monthly check will be available for every person with an annual income less than $120,000 during the pandemic and for 3 months afterwards. This bill also stated there will be retroactive pay dated back to March. As you guys can see, this is very similar to the Emergency Money for the People's Act, but just on steroids. Also during the week, the Senate Democrats, they were set to unveil a Rooseveltian relief package. So in this type of relief package, it was noted to increase spending for local and state governments. So the Democrats, they also framed this as a heroes bill, saying that this money would go to police officers, firefighters, transit workers, and school teachers who are normally paid by the local government. So inside this proposal, they are also expected to include $25 billion for the US Postal Service. So in the upcoming days, Democratic leaders are expected to release this bill and to vote as early as next week. But unfortunately, there are no rumors or confirmations whether or not this would include any extra money for the American people. But is the president actually considering giving people more money? So earlier this week, the POTUS did say that he was considering further stimulus packages, but he wanted to take a little bit of a pause before passing it. As of right now, we really don't know what's inside of this relief package, but it is expected to cost around $800 billion. So just be mindful that with all the relief packages and the stimulus packages, the US so far tallied up about $3 trillion. But as for any other additional stimulus relief plans, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he said that Congress needs to take a pause before passing any more pandemic relief legislation. So as of right now, it seems like they just want to wait and see, since more and more businesses are opening their doors. So hopefully lawmakers from both sides of the party come together and agree on something. So depending on how that conversation turns out, that will probably be the biggest determining factor whether or not we will see a second round of stimulus checks or even reoccurring stimulus checks. But instead of waiting for a second round of stimulus checks, one county in the US is already offering $1,000 stimulus payments to its 40,000 residents. So in DeVal County, which is a county in Florida that also includes Jacksonville, they receive $160 million that was a part of their coronavirus aid. But there were some requirements that they did have to meet. They had to be a resident of the county, have a household income less than $75,000, have experienced 25% reduction in pay or hours due to the COVID-19 crisis, and also show documentation that they were employed as of February 29th. And boy, was there a demand. The first 35 minutes, 12,000 appointments were booked to apply for this. And within less than 24 hours, all appointments have been booked for a chance to be eligible for the extra $1,000. So now let's talk about rents. So as of late, there has been some trends on Twitter called #CancelRent and #Can'tPayMay. So from what I researched, these rent strikes are becoming more and more common in higher cost of living areas such as New York or California. Even those who are collecting the additional $600 a week from unemployment benefits, a big chunk of that does go towards rent and mortgage payments if you live in those large cities. So for individuals who live in low-cost areas such as the Midwest or the South, their unemployment benefits would go much further. Even though these strikes have been going on, multiple states do have rent and mortgage moratoriums. This basically means that this prevents landlords and banks from evicting or starting new foreclosures during the period of emergencies such as right now. So if you're someone who's currently having troubles trying to pay their rent or mortgage payments, double check with your state and local government to see what are the current rules and laws. Alright guys, so that pretty much does it for me. Subscribe so you don't miss out on any future stimulus videos. If you want to hang out with me some more, check out my videos over here.